This is the goal, to do well on the WTA tour. I'm super proud of what I was able to accomplish, but the end goal is to win slams.
Tennis legend loses control after Alexa Eala's rise, and the tennis world hasn't been the same since. Nobody saw this coming. A quiet rise turned into a thunderous takeover, a teenage outsider shaking the foundations of a sport ruled by untouchable icons. Whispers turned into headlines, respect turned into resentment, and one legend, watching their legacy slip away, finally snapped, on court, off court, and in front of the entire world. Was this jealousy or fear of being replaced? No one noticed her at first. That was the strangest part of it all. While the cameras chased champions and commentators recycled familiar names, Alexa Eala moved quietly through the early rounds, carrying nothing but a racket and an unsettling calm. She wasn't loud. She wasn't controversial. She didn't arrive with bold statements or viral celebrations. And maybe that's why the warning signs were ignored. She came from a place the tennis world rarely looks toward for its next superstar. No long legacy of champions, no automatic respect, just raw talent, discipline, and a belief that didn't need approval. Coaches described her as polite but relentless. Practice partners said she listened more than she spoke. Opponents, early on, dismissed her as a feel-good story. That mistake would come back to haunt them. Her first big win wasn't dramatic on the surface. No smashed rackets, no emotional collapse from the other side of the net, just a scoreboard that didn't make sense to people who thought they understood hierarchy. A seeded player out, a teenager through. Analysts called it luck. Fans called it exciting. Veterans called it a bad day. But bad days don't repeat themselves like this. Match after match, Alexa's game revealed something uncomfortable. She didn't rush. She didn't panic when momentum shifted. When she was broken, she broke back. When the crowd leaned against her, she leaned forward. The more pressure increased, the quieter she became. And that silence? It began to feel loud. The whispers started before the headlines did. How is she reading the game like this? She doesn't play like her age. She's not afraid of names. That last one mattered, because in women's tennis, names carry weight. They command space. They bend umpires, crowds, narratives. Legends don't just win matches, they control atmospheres. And Alexa Eala, without meaning to, was disrupting that balance simply by refusing to be intimidated. One rally changed everything. A long exchange, deep into a deciding set, against a player whose career had already crossed into the history books. Power versus precision, experience versus instinct. When the final shot clipped the line and the point ended, there was no roar from Alexa, no fist pump, just a calm walk to the baseline, eyes forward. The crowd erupted anyway. That was the moment something shifted, not just on the scoreboard, but in perception. The commentators stopped calling her promising and started calling her dangerous. Social media lit up with clips, slowed down, analyzed, debated. Some praised her composure, others questioned her confidence, mistaking calm for arrogance. And somewhere else, far from the court, someone was watching closely. A legend, a name that once inspired fear, now felt something unfamiliar tighten in their chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was recognition, the kind you get when you see the future arriving earlier than expected, when applause that once followed you begins to follow someone else. Alexa Eala didn't celebrate that win like a breakthrough. She spoke softly in interviews, thanked her team, said she was still learning. But learning what, exactly? How to beat idols? How to survive pressure that crushes grown champions? Because one truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Her rise wasn't accidental, and it wasn't slowing down. What no one knew then was that her quiet ascent was already pushing someone else toward the edge. Legends aren't supposed to feel threatened. That's the myth, at least. By the time Alexa Eala's name began circulating beyond highlight reels, the reactions from the top tier of women's tennis followed a familiar pattern. Publicly, there was praise, smiles in press conferences, carefully chosen words about young talent and the future of the sport. On the surface, everything looked respectful. But beneath that surface, something was shifting. The locker room noticed it first. Conversations went quiet when Alexa walked in. Not hostile, just observant. Eyes lingered a second longer. Some players studied her like a puzzle they hadn't prepared for. Others avoided her altogether, unwilling to engage with the uncomfortable idea that this rise wasn't temporary. And then there was the legend. A player whose career had been built on dominance, on emotional intensity, on bending matches through sheer force of will. For years, opponents had cracked under that pressure. Rackets smashed, confidence evaporated. Control was her signature, of matches, of moments, of narratives. Until control began slipping. It started with body language. A missed return followed by a glare toward the coaching box. A double fault answered with a clenched jaw, a muttered complaint. Commentators brushed it off as competitiveness. Fans recognized it as frustration. But those close to the situation felt something deeper. This wasn't about one match or one opponent. This was about presence, about how Alexa played as if the aura of legends didn't exist. She didn't rush between points. She didn't avert her eyes. She didn't perform respect. She embodied indifference to reputation. And indifference is dangerous. After one particularly tight match elsewhere on the tour, the legend was asked about the younger generation. It was supposed to be a routine question, a softball. Instead, the answer landed awkwardly. "Talent is one thing," she said, pausing just long enough to be noticed. "But consistency, respect, those take time." No names were mentioned, none were needed. Fans caught it immediately. Clips spread online, slowed down, dissected. Some defended the comment as experience talking. Others saw it for what it felt like, a line drawn in the sand. The next time Alexa played, the tension followed her onto the court. Crowds leaned in differently now. Every unforced error became evidence. Every confident shot became a statement. When she won a long rally, cheers were louder. When she missed, the murmurs were sharper. The sport, hungry for drama, had begun choosing sides. And the legend? She watched. From practice courts, from hotel rooms, from a distance that felt closer with every win Alexa collected. Each victory added weight to a question no one wanted to ask out loud. What happens when dominance meets inevitability? The breaking point didn't come with a handshake or a headline. It came in a moment of loss. A match the legend was expected to control slipped away. Points rushed, tempers flared, and for the first time in a long time, the opponent across the net wasn't intimidated. She was inspired by the chaos. Afterward, in a press conference filled with flashing cameras, the legend leaned back in her chair and exhaled. "This sport is changing," she said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Some called it honesty. Others called it bitterness. But one thing was certain. The crack had appeared, and Alexa Eala's rise was no longer just a story of success. It was a catalyst. By now, it wasn't just about tennis anymore. Alexa Eala's matches no longer lived quietly on scoreboards. They lived online, in comment sections, debates, and clipped moments replayed millions of times. Every win felt louder than the last. Every calm reaction, every composed walk to the chair was interpreted as confidence by some and provocation by others. The divide was growing. Fans hailed her as the future, fearless, focused, unbothered by reputation. Others questioned her demeanor. Too cold, too sure, she should show more respect. The same composure that once went unnoticed was now under a microscope. And then came the moment everyone talked about. After a hard-fought victory, Alexa paused at the net just a second longer than usual. No smile, no apology for winning, just a firm handshake and a nod before turning away. It lasted less than a heartbeat, but in a sport obsessed with etiquette, it was enough. Clips exploded across social media. "Did you see that? That was intentional. She knows exactly what she's doing." The legend's name began trending alongside hers. Comparisons flooded timelines. Old clips resurfaced, fiery celebrations, intimidating stares, emotional outbursts, contrasted against Alexa's silence. The contrast felt symbolic, almost confrontational. In a press interaction days later, the legend was asked directly about the new generation's attitude. Her response was sharp. "They're talented," she said, "but talent without humility doesn't last." That sentence lit the fuse. Supporters rushed to defend Alexa, critics piled on, former players weighed in. The story had officially shifted from rising star to cultural clash, old fire versus new ice. Alexa, meanwhile, said nothing. No posts, no rebuttals, no clarifications. And somehow, that silence spoke the loudest. Because the more the noise grew around her, the more it felt like the pressure wasn't on the newcomer anymore. It was on the legend, struggling to accept that the spotlight was no longer hers alone. The escalation was complete. The moment of control slipping turned into a full-blown storm. Headlines screamed, social media exploded, legend loses temper ran alongside Alexa Eala shakes the tennis world. Analysts debated every gesture, every glance, every pause. The sport that thrives on precision and composure suddenly became a theater of emotion. Backlash hit the legend first. Fans criticized her outbursts, former champions questioned her sportsmanship, and sponsors watched nervously. In interviews, every comment was dissected. A sigh, a shrug, a sharp tone, all evidence that Alexa's rise had triggered something no one expected. Meanwhile, Alexa's inbox overflowed with messages of support and criticism alike. The young star's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding her, fueling both admiration and resentment. The narrative had shifted, no longer just about skill, but about temperament, respect, and generational conflict. And somewhere in the shadows, whispers of retaliation began. The legend wasn't done. She wouldn't let her legacy be overshadowed without a fight. Tennis, once a game of predictable routines and established hierarchies, had become unpredictable. Every match now carried stakes far beyond the scoreline. The world was watching, and the fallout was just beginning. After weeks of swirling controversy, the moment for clarity arrived. Alexa Eala finally spoke, softly, measured, and without theatrics. "I respect every player I face," she said. "I just want to play my game and improve." Those simple words, seemingly innocent, ignited a new round of discussion. Some hailed them as maturity beyond her years. Others dismissed them as carefully crafted PR. Meanwhile, the legend faced scrutiny like never before. Former coaches, peers, and commentators dissected her reactions, questioning whether losing composure was ever justified. Was it frustration at her own performance, or fear of being replaced? Public opinion split sharply, and the story of one match had morphed into a story about sportsmanship, generational shifts, and personal pride. In interviews, other top players began weighing in. Emma Raducanu praised Alexa's calm under pressure, calling it inspiring for anyone who loves the game. Novak Djokovic, in a rare comment about women's tennis, noted how pressure tests not just skill, but character. Behind closed doors, reconciliation quietly began. Emails exchanged, apologies offered, respect reaffirmed. The storm of public outrage started to fade, replaced by a cautious acknowledgement. The world of tennis was evolving. The truth was simple, yet profound. Success alone doesn't create tension. Human emotion, pride, and the clash of personalities do. Alexa's rise didn't destroy a legend. It revealed the vulnerabilities everyone had long ignored. And the question lingered, could respect survive in a game where the next superstar is already waiting in the wings? In the weeks that followed, the dust began to settle, but the story of Alexa Eala's rise lingered like a shadow over women's tennis. The matches continued, the tournaments moved on, and yet the conversation never truly ended. Fans debated, analysts analyzed, and players adjusted, all aware that a new era was quietly unfolding. Alexa herself remained calm, focused, and disciplined. Every victory was measured, every loss absorbed without theatrics. She had learned that success was never just about skill, but about perception, patience, and poise. The young star had changed expectations simply by refusing to conform to the invisible rules of intimidation and hierarchy. The legend, now more composed, returned to form, but with a subtle difference. Every match carried a reminder. Dominance was no longer guaranteed. Humility and resilience had become as essential as power and technique. The clash with Alexa had been a mirror, reflecting not weakness, but humanity. Tennis, as a sport, had gained something rare, a dramatic narrative that combined talent, emotion, and generational tension. A story where both the newcomer and the veteran could be admired, criticized, and ultimately understood. And for viewers, the question remained, was this just the rise of a new star, or the beginning of a complete shift in the landscape of women's tennis? One thing was certain, the drama, the passion, and the stakes would never be the same again. Subscribe to follow the next chapter in tennis history, where legends are challenged and futures are written on the court.